Mm.
Welcome to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the people that bring them to us. Before we get started, though, let's go around the room, have everyone introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Chantal.
Hi, I'm Chantal Mayer, and I write romance, and I'm actually here with my co-writer, Susan Scott Shelley. We write male-male romance.
All right, we'll jump right down to you, Susan.
I'm Susan Scott Shelley, as Chantal said. We are co-writing multiple series together, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and we're having a great time working together on that.
All right, perfect. Nancy.
I'm Nancy Northcott. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books and several subgenres of male-female romance, and I'm going to talk about one of those tonight.
And finally, Joshua.
Hi, my name is Josh Pantalleresco. I write stuff. I write poetry, science fiction, fantasy, nonfiction as well, freelancing. My release is Poetry Alice 1, which just came out in December.
All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'll start with you, Nancy. Tell us about your new release and where the idea came from.
Well, I'm really excited about it. They're the Light Mage Wars paranormal romances, and 3 of the books in the series were originally published by someone else, but they've now reverted to me. So I have the whole series, which is about half written. I just put the covers up because I have them and I like them, and so there they are. I wanted to write a paranormal romance with magic because I just didn't feel like I had anything to bring to the vamps and shifters side of the table. And I was in a brainstorming group, and we were talking about how to set it up and how to set it. And the first book in the series is the one right at my shoulder in the blue with Renegade Mage, which was originally published as Renegade. And I have the most notorious traitor in the mage world and the Southeastern Mage Sheriff as my hero and heroine. But I wanted to set it in the South. I didn't want to use Atlanta because a lot of people were using Atlanta. And so we just kind of kicked it around. And when I was little, we used to go to Florida to visit my dad's brother and his family. And on the way back, we would always stop and do something, just our family. And we stopped one year and went to the Okefenokee Swamp. And I remembered almost nothing about it, except A, it was a swamp, although really it's not. It's a blackwater peat bog. And my mother refused to take a boat trip because she was afraid a snake would fall in the boat. That's all I remember. I was like 7, 8 years old. And one of the people in the brainstorming group said, well, you know, energy is different around a swamp. And then we were kind of off and running. And so the stories do not actually take place in the swamp. They take place in the area of the swamp. Because as much as I love it, I'm not nature woman. I like my surroundings climate controlled and my wildlife safely distant. But I have fallen in love with the Okefenokee Swamp. So it's kind of the backdrop for the stories in the book. And it figures now and again, but most of the stories do not take place actually in the swamp. But they are action adventure. The arc of the series is that the ghouls have allied with demons from the void between worlds and are trying to open a gate to bring the demons in. And if they do, we are all done for. And so that's the arc of the series. And in the first 3 books, we kind of get started on that. And those are the ones that are my new and upcoming releases. I'm re-releasing all of them, but these will be out in January and February. And those are the ones with the big covers. And then the others with big covers are Christmas stories that I wrote, along the way.
All right, perfect. Josh.
So my series kind of came about by, I was asked to do it. Originally, I was asked about a year ago to do a Lewis Carroll based story in anthology. And I was like, cool, I'm in. But then the problem is, okay, what do I say about Lewis Carroll that hasn't already been said? I had no idea. So I was just like, okay, what do I know about Lewis Carroll? So that night I go to a bar and I meet this girl with a Gorgon tattoo on her arm. And I go to hit on her. She plays for the other team. It's all good. We're actually still really good friends. But she had this Gorgon tattoo. It's like, can I put you in this story? I'm thinking in my head. It's like, because Medusa could fit in totally into like an Alice in Wonderland, no problem, I thought. And then I had this real like epiphany. Alice is Pandora. They're essentially the same story. So suddenly I had this whole concept of what Alice in Wonderland could really be, because if you sit there and think about it, Pandora and Alice have curiosity in common. Alice's curiosity leads her down the rabbit hole. Pandora's curiosity leads her to open the box. So okay, if I can take the elements of both that are the same and diversify them, I can make something really unique and wonderfully different. So Alice opens the box in my story. In the first book, Alice Zero, which is, although it did not make the final cut of the anthology, the person asked me, just do something with this. It's good. It just didn't fit where the anthology ended up going in terms of pieces submitted. And I was like, okay, so I'll keep going with it. So I got somebody to do it, and I released it last year, and this year was nominated for the Elgin Award from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association. But I had to continue the story. So Alice woke up in this asylum where the playing cards were her jailers. And I got to, like, again, mix and mash some Greek stuff, like the Mad Hatter's Kronos, because the Mad Hatter and Kronos both kill time. It just fits so wonderfully well. And so book 2, she escapes the asylum, and she's chasing the queen. The queen goes over the edge of the world. And over the edge of the world, Alice follows her. But she ends up on the Argo in like this abandoned, weird sea where the mocking turtle and Poseidon are been linked together in a very unusual way. I won't spoil it. You got to read it to find out. And then it just leads to like this underworld thing. So I have this very whimsical, how did a friend of mine goes, the book will sneak up on you. It's very much an exploration of oneself and discovery. And again, a certain Cheshire friend is actually inside Alice's head, so their dynamic is hilarious.
Perfect. So I say Susan next, but since you two worked on it together, you can answer in tandem or one after the other.
We are very good at running into each other's sentences. So.
We are.
So Spark is the first book in our Love and Rugby series. It takes place in Philadelphia, the whole series does. And we have slightly older heroes than our typical, our hockey players are in like their 20s. So these guys are 37 and a just turned 40. The book opens at the guy who's turning 40, his birthday celebration. And he runs into a bouncer who is the other love interest. We have our cover here. Spark.
Oh,
and
Susan
so it's
froze.
A brother's best friend and teammate's brother, because one of the guys plays on the rec league rugby team. The other guy does not. The other guy does not like rugby and thinks it's entirely too dangerous. So that's a nice little issue they have to deal with. But they're both very devoted to their families, and they have that in common. And you kind of, I don't know, it's not insta-love, but there's a connection, and just kind of is great until bad things happen. So.
And can we say what our one guy, can we say what he's the owner of?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Business. So it's a family-owned business, and they own a condom company, so that's fun.
Yeah,
so what sparked the idea?
So we were in an anthology last year, and we had a hockey romance set in Philly, and we had a character that was this is bad because this is our 4th book together, and we're writing to it at the same time, and everything's in my head right now. Everybody is very intermingling. So we have a character named Jalen, who is a youth hockey coach and also a bouncer. And I threw Jalen into a scene, and Chantal said that Jalen... Wait a minute. Hang on a second. I'm sorry, they're wrapping around each other. Basically, we knew there was much more to Jalen than just this little line. So he got an entire book, and then we were thinking about the club where they bounce, and then the other bouncers that are there, and how everything kind of is like, there's a connection everywhere.
Yeah.
With people who know each other through work or through friends or through the teams. or know each, or have, say, a third or fourth party in common, how it all kind of just like this web of connections. And
Yeah, it's very 6 degrees of separation. And Susan and we tend to, Susan will, like, there will be just, you think it's like kind of a throwaway character, just someone who, like, comes in and serves serves
purpose
water
in
or
a
something.
scene, right?
Yeah, and then
And
all
then
of a sudden
they end
have
up getting a book, because we'll talk about them, and we end up writing backstories for them, and then like they need a book. So
Yeah.
we now have this series right now is at 5 or 6 books planned out. We have
6, 5, 6. Yeah.
first one's January, second one's February, third one's March, fourth one will be over the summer, fifth and sixth. So yeah, they're all
6,
just yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
spiraling.
then we have other series that are coming up.
Jumping
also.
off from the rec league into other things.
Yes.
So yeah.
All right. So my next question, and Josh, I'll go with you. Was there any part of this process with the book that took you out of your comfort zone? And how did it impact you as a writer, if it did?
So I've done these like this whole story is a poem. Like it's a giant, epic, Gilgamesh style epic poem. So I've done a few of these before. The interesting thing about this was might be the closest I've ever come to taking that form and making it like a fantasy novel, because I very much made this. So the croquet game is very strange. There's Stygian birds involved. There's a lot of Jason's past heroics are mentioned in various ways. So one of the challenges I had with this was dialogue, because I'm doing it in a poem form. So traditional dialogue isn't like what you would traditionally do with dialogue here. It would be, you can still do it to some extent, but you don't want to do it too much because it wrecks the flow of what you're doing. So, like for example, for how Alice talks to the cat always talks in parentheses, right? Because cat's always in her head or sometimes in her shadow, depending on the scene and the circumstances involved. So when I got to the part, like, so Jason has to take the golden fleece from a dragon that doesn't sleep. So I was like, how the heck am I going to make this like different? And then it occurred to me, it's like, instead of doing a typical like dialogue box, just change the fonts, like capitalizations and smalls, because he's an insomniac. It's probably half delirious, a little half mad anyway. So you might as well have some fun with that. A dragon that cannot sleep. So that's what I kind of did. Like the challenge with this book for me more than anything else was when the characters were interacting together, could I make it feel like a poem and not completely, but also kind of feel like a story too. So, I mean, there's some technical stuff. In terms of the format, I've done, like, this is my 5th one. It's my longest one to date was this one, but this was my 5th one like this, so.
All right. Susan.
So the hardest thing for me, honestly, was making sure we got the rugby right. Because hockey, I've watched hockey since I was like 11. I know hockey. Rugby, I've seen it a bit, but I didn't really know things. I know there's a try, there's a scrum, there's a maul, but actually making sure we got that right, that was probably the hardest thing for me. I watched a lot of YouTube rugby videos, like 101 stuff. It was actually very interesting, and it's fabulous now, but getting that right was probably the toughest thing. And then honestly, just maybe co-writing probably could be difficult because you're both writing. We alternate chapters, and we each take a POV, and then so somebody else's genius brain is pouring into this book too. So just making sure that we're staying on with say our outline and stuff like that. But that hasn't been a problem because Chantal's very organized and has a very lovely spreadsheet for us, which is very good. So
Well, you do the lovely, and I think this is what works so well is I think we each have different strengths, and
Yes.
and so I love a spreadsheet. So I've got our spreadsheet, but Susan is phenomenal at like putting the outline out. Like, you know, we'll sit down and discuss it, and she gets it up, and so we know what each chapter is going to be, and so that's been really, really helpful for me.
Hey, me too. Me too.
So Chantal, what has taken you out of your comfort zone?
Well, I think like Susan said, I think, you know, this is the first time like that I've ever written with someone else. And Susan and I have been critique partners for years, but it's different when you're writing together. And so I think it was, you know, kind of getting into a rhythm. And now we're in like, we have got a rhythm. But I think it was just kind of, I feel like some of the logistics, just working those out. Not that it was terribly challenging, but it was, I feel like we learned from the first, you know, the first story we wrote together, we learned, and we continue. I mean, we continue to say, oh, we should do this differently. We can, you know, we can improve on this. But I think that was probably, the biggest challenge, was just getting into a rhythm.
Yeah.
And you know, and like Susan said, you have this other person who who you're like, okay, are you okay? Like, would your character say this? Like, are you okay that I wrote, like, is that good, or do I need to change this? You know, just being open to that, which I think we both are. I think that's been really, that actually has probably been easy for us.
All right, perfect. Nancy.
Well, before I talk about the mages, I have to say that what Susan and Chantal were saying was really resonating with me, because I co-write a science fiction series with Jeannie Adams, and Jeannie is all about spreadsheets. She's got spreadsheets that keep up with everything: the characters, the planets, you know, what book somebody first appeared in, what they said. And we're going to wind up this arc of the series with a book with alternating chapters, and neither of us has ever done that before. So we may be emailing you and say, okay, what about this? But for the Light Mages series, the first book that was written, Renegade Mage, is actually now the second book in the series. And it took me out of my comfort zone because the hero made some ill-advised choices, driven by grief and temper. He didn't make the best possible choices at a critical moment, and because of that, people died. And I'd never really had to write a character, or tried to write a character, who was carrying that kind of a burden. And so it really was a lot to dig into. As a result of the choices he made, he is the mage world's most wanted fugitive. And he's been branded a traitor and a ghoul ally. And trying to balance he looks like this, he's guilty about this, but he's really this, was something that I hadn't done before. And when I got toward the end of that book, all of a sudden his sister walked onto the page. And his sister is a blind artist, but she's a mage, so she can see enough color by touch that she makes fabric art. And I thought, she needs a book. Well, I've never been without my eyesight. I don't know what that's like. I love Daredevil, the superhero who navigates with his radar sense, but I've never done that. And I also wanted to be sure that I treated that subject respectfully. And I have a college friend who lost his eyesight in his 20s. And his sister is also a friend of mine. And he agreed to talk to me about how Caroline would navigate through the world. And it made sense to set that book before Renegade Mage. That's Mage Sentinel. Because how would it feel to think your older brother, the person who helped you at every difficult point in your life, a person you're incredibly close to, is being labeled a traitor and there's a price on his head? How do you live with that? And then how do you live with it if this really attractive guy comes along and you don't know he's a reporter who's been promised that the newspaper will push for an investigation into his father's incidents that smeared his father's reputation so that his father drank himself to death. How do you make that sympathetic? I mean, yeah, you're sorry for his father, but he's using this young woman, and he thinks he's doing it in the cause of justice because her brother's never been found. It's been 3 years. What the heck? He must have help, and therefore his family must be helping them. And so for me, it was kind of a dive into conflicting allegiances more than any other romance I had written. And because if we don't like Rick, people put the book down and they walk away. If they think Caroline is unsympathetic or, you know, too stupid to live because she can't see the truth about her brother, they put the book down and they walk away. And so those really challenged me to look at character in a way that I hadn't looked at it before. And so that for me, I was really happy with the way it turned out, but it was a challenge to go there with these people.
Yeah, perfect. So Susan, what do you do? I know you've kind of answered this, at least in part, but what do you do to research for your books, or this book in particular?
So for this one in particular, I did have to do a deep dive into how do you play rugby. And I found some really good how-to series by, I think it's an Atlanta Rugby League. And it's break down what it is, how do you play, different things like that. Had to do research into, because our bouncer, you know, what's it like to be a bouncer? What's it like to be a contractor? Because he works with home renovations. Chantal had to do research. I'm answering for you. I'm sorry. I do this a lot with her. Sorry. But just really digging into what that's like. I mean, setting things in Philly was pretty easy because I grew up here. I'm still here. But so yeah, mainly just digging into which is, I think, that always the most fun part is, you know, we tend to give our characters, not always, but a lot of times, maybe a fun job that sounds interesting that, you know, you wouldn't mind spending time doing. We have an upcoming book where the guy is a zoologist, and I love animal shows, so I'm like, I want to write him, please, can I write him? But it's just been, yeah, like, I love research, and I really enjoyed digging into rugby, and then, you know, what's it really like to be a bouncer and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Chantal, are there spreadsheets involved?
There are, and actually,
There
I
are.
was going to say the links to the rugby YouTube and all are on our spreadsheets.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, and it is like we both did a lot of research on rugby, and then I also had fun doing research on condoms and condom companies and
Sustainable options.
sustainable options. I found out that there are people who are working on spray-on condoms, which I have so many questions about, and I cannot find the answers to them. So, you know, I mean, it's just really, and I would like text Susan, did you know there are spray-on condoms? Like, so, yeah, like it's, and then, you know, we'll go down a rabbit hole. There's like a birthday cake for a child, and it's supposed to be kind of over the top. So of course I spent way longer than I needed to, like looking at birthday cakes for kids that are, you know, 5 tiers high, and so there's always research to do.
All right, Nancy.
I mostly call on my friends, and I turn to the Google. I've already mentioned my friend who helped me with Caroline's situation. One of the professors at our local state university who taught fabric art answered questions for me online. It's helpful when you're married to somebody. My husband's a college professor, and so I can say, I need somebody who knows about this. Do you know anybody who knows about this? And not always, but a lot of the time he does. And I have a friend who's got a black belt, and her husband has a black belt with some stripes on it. And Griffin, the hero of Renegade Mage, fights with a quarterstaff. I've taken martial arts. I didn't get to the bow staff part. And a quarterstaff is a little different from a bow staff because it's thicker. A bow staff tapers at the ends. And so I watch videos on YouTube, videos on quarterstaff fighting. And then I wrote the scene and I ran it by them. And she also knows people who are in emergency medicine. So for The Deadly Orb, that book opens with a rescue during a wildfire in the Okefenokee Swamp. And they have to get to the injured firefighter and fly him out there, and he's not in good shape. So what goes on in the helicopter while the hero and the heroine are talking, how is she she's the paramedic, how is she taking care of him? And they helped me with that. That book was sort of inspired by a visit to the Okefenokee as an adult. I mean, we had gone to Disney World on vacation, and you drive right by the Okefenokee or turn off to it on the way. And so my husband and son very generously agreed to go visit a swamp on our vacation. And so Renegade had sold at that point. It was originally titled Renegade. And so we drove into the swamp and the visitor center for the eastern side of the Okefenokee. And I remember saying to them, I really hope this is as cool as I think it is, because I'm stuck with it now. And we took an hour and a half boat trip, and I really fell in love with it. It's not a swamp, it's a blackwater peat bog. And when the water is undisturbed, it's like an obsidian mirror. You can take a picture and flip it, and you can't be sure which side is up and which side is down. Now, when there's the boat disturbs the water, so that kind of solves that problem. But it's just an astonishing place. And the guide on the boat had a gallon milk jug that he had cut the top off of and left the handle. And he reached over and scooped up the water, and it was brown. It's got tannic acid in it. And he told us that the Romans put water with tannic acid in it in their water bottles that they carried, the Roman army, because it keeps the water from developing bacteria. And so it was really interesting. It was fortunate that we visited when we did, because they told us in another month the deer flies would make boat trips really not a lot of fun. But we took several trips back there, and including one ill-advised trip over Martin Luther King weekend, because even though this is South Georgia in January, when you're in a motorboat moving on the water, it's cold. So he gets points for not going, why are we out here in this cold weather? I'd go, you all right? He'd go, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Ask your questions. So it was an interesting journey to write these books. And every time I go, I get ideas for things that can happen. And so it's just been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot, and I'm a geek. So if I go somewhere to research something and I learn a lot, then I'm happy. And really, that's about it.
All right, perfect. Josh.
Okay, so in general, when I research something, it depends on what I'm researching. If I'm researching how to do something, I go to YouTube University. YouTube has like a guide on how to do absolutely everything. When I do like typical search engines, this is where I'm going to disagree with Nancy. I think Google's a terrible search engine to look for information, to be perfectly honest with you. I tend to use DuckDuckGo or something else because I get to the good stuff faster that way. That's neither here nor there. For this particular story, there were three things I really looked up. So so when I was living in Windsor, Ontario, I found at a used bookstore the Annotated Alice in Wonderland, which is really cool because it's got all the little notes by the Lewis Carroll Society back from that era. So you learn all these interesting like references and all the stuff that comes about. For example, the fact that I never knew that up until I read this, that nobody that's referred to in Wonderland is actually a character in a lot of Carroll stories. I didn't realize that until I read the Annotated Alice, which gave me a lot of interesting ideas I'm going to explore in future books. But like stuff like that's really interesting. Obviously, reading the literature is huge. For this in particular, Jason the Argonauts, researching his story, finding like doing those things makes a lot of sense. The last two, although one I won't go into too much detail in this conversation, I looked up game theory particularly for dice, and the reason for that is because there is an aspect to the story that in June, July I'm going to re-explore that has very much to do with games, particularly Snakes and Ladders. The other part of it is Carl Jung. I'm dealing with shadows and ego, and the fact is, Alice in Wonderland is a dream. Like, that's what it is. It's at the end of the day, it's a dream. So if I'm to inform the dream, you might as well look at one of the most interesting archetype masters that's ever done psychology. So for this Alice series in general, I usually take the Greek stories I'm trying to focus on. I mash it up with the particular Alice in Wonderland stuff I'm really focused on, and I usually use a little bit, again, because shadows play such a big part of this and ID plays a big part of this, I kind of mix and mash it up with the psychology of it, and that's basically the basic research. And then I add some game theory because blah blah blah, redacted for now.
I'm just gonna say that I feel like everyone's like, oh, I did this research, and I'm like, I found spray-on condoms. Like,
truth be told, so my favorite. So I read a book called Crooked Little Bane by Warren Ellis, and it's literally about a journey into the heart of the underbelly of America. My favorite chapter in the whole thing is when they finally got to the Bible Belt in Nashville, Tennessee. Right, they actually had Jesus condoms. right, they actually had Jesus condoms. So although I have to say the spray-on is interesting for sure, and I'm definitely curious. I'm not going to say I'm not.
So many questions.
But yeah. It's not the most shocking thing I've ever read or heard about with condoms. And reading my literature, which might say something about me, I don't know, but that's okay.
Well, but you did the research you needed to do for your book. I mean,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just again. Everyone else just feels very, like scholarly. Like I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
I'm played Snakes and Ladders for my research, Chantal. I want you to think about that for a second. I goofed off and can call it research. So,
and if it makes you feel any better, for Gigi's Magic Christmas, the only research I did is the character's Cuban, and I called a friend who's Cuban and said, what do they have for Christmas dinner? That was it. So,
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you.
yeah.
Whatever the book needs,
All right. So my next question, and I'll start with you, Chantal. An author can't really help putting themselves into their own writing. What do you recognize of yourself in a character? Or, I understand the story isn't necessarily, anyway. What do you recognize of yourself in the characters?
Well, it's so funny because Susan and I, when we talk, whenever we're talking about our characters, like backstory or what, there is always something. Like one of us will be like, well, this is what happened. Like, when I was a kid, this happened, or I know this. So there's just always. I mean, I don't know that I can say, I can't even pinpoint right now in this story, because I just feel like it's this constant conversation that Susan and I have.
I agree. I feel like there's aspects of us in every character we've written, and there's maybe specific things that have happened to us that we give to some of our characters.
Yes.
Whether it's something really funny or something that honestly we might need to process ourselves, and we end up processing it through writing this character in this story. But there's been a lot. Even if it's something as simple as one of the book we're currently writing now, book 4, the POV guy I'm writing, has like all these different color combat boots. Well, because I started doing that too. And we're just like silly things, or like hair dye, or
in Spark we have, remember I was having work done in my house.
This is put in for our entertainment only.
Yeah, we put things in to entertain ourselves. Like we were getting new flooring put in our house.
Poor Chantal.
A year ago. Yeah. And
Charlie.
I know the company it was local owned, and the son-in-law of the owner was just a hot mess, and like was driving me insane. Like, not my my flooring, it took forever to get it, and like all
They
these
ordered
things,
the
and I
wrong
was so
one.
upset. I would complain to Susan. I'm like, this guy, like, oh my gosh, da, da, da. So Susan's like, we'll put him in. So he's
He
in
works
our
for the
book.
renovation company, and he's a screw up that just is a menace. That is a walking disaster, and that is just for our entertainment.
It was
And-
totally for our entertainment, but it made me feel better. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for putting him in. I appreciate it.
But I mean, so it could be silly things like that, or I mean, in the hockey series I wrote, I guess I finished that last year. One of the books, the guy comes home at he's been away, he's been playing all season. He comes back home, and the mother uses the good china for dinner. My mother, I am the second oldest of 6, would use the good china when the baby would come over for dinner on a random weeknight. I never got the good china when I went over, but the baby does. So just something silly like that. So I threw that in because my backup goalie was the baby of the family, and just little things. But it could be. I mean, we talking about maybe a character's loneliness or the death of a family member that a character's dealing with, and maybe that's something that you process it, like I said, through your writing, and that's just so. Yeah, I think I can see aspects of us in pretty much everything we've written.
Yeah.
And then the coffee addiction for most of them is entirely
That's
me.
you.
And to end on a lighter note there, but But yeah.
Nancy?
Well, I agree that we're all in our characters to some extent. I mean, the heroine of Renegade Mage, Valeria, is the Shire Reeve or sheriff of the Southeast Mages, and she's a rule follower. She's the sheriff. Of course, she's a rule follower. I'm a rule follower. Val kind of gets shaken out of her comfort zone in the course of the book, but she started out a rule follower. And then Griff's best friend, Stefan, is a doctor, and he's very responsible. Well, I'm the older. I was very responsible. Stefan deviates from that because he's allied with, a wanted traitor and renegade. But in general, he's very responsible. And then the third guy in the book, when Will sauntered into the frame, I thought, well, it's time for something different with Will. And I'm a total nerd. I've been reading comic books since I was 8 years old. I love science fiction. And so Will is into all of that. He's also a very good gamer, which I couldn't get the hang of once I had to push more than one button at a time. But he loves gaming. And he can tell you who carried which color lightsaber in all the Star Wars movies. He knows all the X-Men's names. That's Will. Of course, Will also has 2 PhDs and a black belt. I took karate. I didn't get to the black belt because I kept hurting my back and I have bad knees. So, Will's a little bit of projection there for me. And I just think they're all a little bit me in some way. Will's probably the closest, except Will's kind of a dog when we first meet him. He's never met a woman he wasn't interested in chatting up. And so when we get to Will's book, that's kind of like, really? That's the way you think you're going to approach things? So those are the 3 or 4 that most closely mirror me.
Okay. And Josh, yours is kind of different since you're using pre-established characters.
It doesn't matter. With established characters, you have to figure out how you connect with them. Otherwise, you can't tell a good story with them. That's just the way it is. So Alice's case, abandonment issues from her mom. Real life, do I have some of those issues myself? I'm just being honest, like with my own relationship with my mom. So there's an aspect of the personal pain there, the aspect there that's very, very from a real place. The Cheshire Cat being a complete and utter troublemaker and dick to Alice because they're in there because the cat knows stuff Alice doesn't, and rubs it in her face. There's a little bit of me in there. I can be that dick sometimes. I can totally be that dick, and I can do that. Some of the other characters in the story, Jason was the one most not like me, but the part where I got it's like the desire to win, the desire to always, because if you really look at like him in Greek mythology, Jason would be a great villain in any other kind of story. He lies, he cheats, he murders, he does all kinds of stuff, but he's favored by the gods. So he's like, no matter what, he always comes out smelling like a rose. Well, I decided to really show how much of an asshole he really could be, right? So that probably is a character at least like me, but I do all kinds of stuff that's real. I put my friends in stories. I don't kill actually, here's the true story. People love it when you kill them. I've learned this very much. Like, who wants to die in the story? Oh, me. They're cool with that. If I'm truly going to punish somebody, I'm going to make them fan fiction. That's how you punish somebody if you really don't like them. That's how I've learned. That's just my nature. But I would use a character like Medusa very much as a model of the gal I met at the bar. She's still like, again, we're still friends. So it's not like there's a piece of her in there. Like I try to put the best parts I see of her in there, and all the characters, all the stories. Like, I love curiosity. I'm a curious dude. I love exploring. I love discovery. I love wonder. All my books have a little bit of that in me because that's what I enjoy. I love the new discoveries. I love going off into this weird and wacky world where the rules don't make sense. I have a certain sense of the absurd because the world is a strange and wonderful place, right? So even with established characters, you just find those little pieces of them. Like I said, Alice at her most human is just someone that, like, that curiosity is something I can understand all too well. My version of Alice has the tragedy of, again, just of certain abandonment issues. I've had those issues. I know what those are like, and I know how to deal with those things. Yeah, because you have to. Every story, there's always a piece of the author in there, but there's got to be something you care about. You absolutely 100% are passionate. I don't care what the genre is. I don't care what the formula is. If you don't care about something in there, your readers are going to notice. And when they notice it, they're going to put the book down. That's just how it works. So you got to find those pieces of you that really resonate with what you're writing.
All right, perfect. So Nancy, what surprised you the most when writing these books?
Aside from falling in love with a swamp, that was the biggest surprise. I started out to write one book. And then I wrote that book, and first Caroline popped up, and then we went to the Okefenokee. I think I got sidetracked, and I didn't say that I found out when we were there that there'd been a big wildfire in the swamp that had burned for almost a year, because it will burn in peat, which is what the ground there is. It will burn underground and pop up sometimes miles away from where you're fighting it. So that was interesting. And I mean, it's all kind of a process of discovery. I mean, the fact that I then got the idea for all these other books was kind of, really? Because, you know, when you're trying to get a traditional publication contract, you write a book. And if it doesn't sell, then you write something else. If it does sell, then usually they want at least one more book. And maybe that's all they want. But maybe not. And so in trying to think about the contract, things started spinning out. And I had never projected a series that far out. I guess is what about it surprised me, was that I did have ideas for all these books way out in the distance.
Josh?
Oh, I never thought I'd enjoy writing Wonderland this much. This was not, like again, if I had not been asked to write something in that, I never would have done this. So it has led to I'll just say it now. One of the surprises in this, like the game theory thing, I accidentally invented a board game doing this series.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, no, because I wanted to do like a Snakes and Ladders style map for the world, right? At some point, it just occurred to me like that would be very much a cool thing. And then I visualized this map, and this was one of those like where like Eureka moments, like, this is really cool. How do you play this game? And I'm not kidding. The moment I asked that question, the universe answered. I have all these like little rules in the head, and it's just like, and I've tested it a few times. It works. It is a Snakes and Ladders variation, but it very much. I'm going to be doing some kind of crowdfunding thing for it. I'm kind of looking at some options for the summer. The artist I have doing the covers and stuff, she's getting married, so I'm letting her get married. Kind of important, so I'm going to let her do that. But when we're done, I'm going to talk to her. It's like, hey, what do you want to do in terms of board game stuff? Because, you know, I would love to get her to do something with that. And, you know, quietly look at that. So I'll be looking probably in the summer, because that's the other thing. I designed the first book to tie in with the board game very, very much, because I thought, again, stories can be told in a variety of different mediums. Just understanding the story you're telling. Well, the big story here is Alice chases the queen. So I built the game under that premise. Alice chases the queen. So that's the whole idea. So ideally, when I go to the physical printing of the book, there will be a board game to go with it, so you get the full experience of it.
Perfect.
Cool.
Susan.
So I think the discovery for me was just how well Chantal and I were able to co-write these books, and honestly how really the one idea for the one really turned into, here's this character and then he needs a book, and then this character needs a book. And honestly, we have at least 6 books in this series. We've got at least 6 books in the hockey series. We've got, so just the worlds that we keep creating, it's just, I honestly didn't think that, you know, I went into this, I think we kind of both thought, okay, well, let's see how one book goes. Oh, this might be like a 3-book series, we'll see. And then it's really turned into these characters we love that we hope other people will love too and identify with, and, you know, really care about the way we do. And just the spider web of tertiary stories that just, you know, come out from there. So
Yeah,
So
we've
very
really
happy
created,
surprise.
yeah, we've really created a world. I mean, and we've had so much fun. I mean, Susan and I, like I said, we've been critique partners for years, and you know, I mean, we've always had fun together, but I don't think I realized how much fun it would be. Right, like we just have so much fun writing together. We just have a blast, you know, and creating this world has been really just so much more fun than I ever anticipated. So that's been really a pleasant surprise.
So are these stories going to have a thread going through them, or just the fact that they're characters that you'll meet in one book and then they'll get their own story?
So the thread for rugby is everybody is playing on the rec league team in some way. Even if it's, say, one of our book 3 characters was injured, can't play anymore. He's the manager now. But then we have somebody who is the brother-in-law of somebody else, so that there's this light thread of being related, or of we were thinking of possibly doing something where the rugby team and then maybe the hockey team are, you know, kind of like entangled in some way, because I love when I love doing this in my other series, and I love when other authors have characters that, you know, from a book you've loved, they pop up in say another series in some fashion, and I always enjoy that. So the thread pretty much is sports in some way, but then we've got with say the guys' regular day jobs, what they do, how that affects things, and then people that they meet from there, and just the different friendships of, I don't know, it's like Chantal, we just this 6 degrees of separation.
It is.
Yeah. The city is always, though. Everything is
yeah.
in Philly, because I like my city. So.
Yeah, we love Philly.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Well, that'll do it for today. But before we go, we're going to go around again and let everyone know where they can find you and your books. And I'll go ahead and start with you, Josh.
Okay, so let's do a couple things here. I also do a podcast. It's called Just Joshing. I interview authors and other creatives about life, the universe, and everything. As this episode will tell you, I have a big mouth. I'm pretty good at this talking thing. And they even gave me an award for it. You can actually watch it on Twitch regularly. Episodes resume again January 6th on Twitch, but I'm on pretty much every audio platform you can. Alice 1, my latest release, is available exclusively on Amazon for the time being. Like I mentioned, I got plans for this. You can kind of hear, you've heard some of them already on this episode. But for now, you can buy the ebook currently on Amazon. If you want to see Alice play Jason in the underworld croquet and kind of deal with the monsters of gods and monsters and probably the biggest nightmare of all themselves, this is your book. I promise you you'll have a good time. And beyond that, you can find me. Just look for the last name, J. Pantalleresco. I'm kind of unique. I mean, it's not something you're going to see too often. That's where you'll find me anywhere like that. Come say hi. I don't bite, I promise. Anyways, and thank you guys for having me on the show.
And that's Alice 1 as in?
WON ?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And then next, Susan.
So you can find me at susanscottshelley.com, and my handle on most things is Susan Scott Shelley. You can also find me and Chantal at shelleyandmare.com. It has all of our co-writing adventures and our little YouTube channel is the Introvert's Corner, where we do things both indoors and out in the world. Well, it's on hiatus right now, but
Yeah, out in the world has been hard.
it's been mostly Zooms lately.
All right, Chantal.
So you can find me at on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, Chantal, and at chantalmare.com, and as Susan said, at shelleyandmare.com.
Finally, Nancy.
You can find me at nancynorthcott.com. The social media site I spend the most time on is Twitter, where I'm at Nancy Northcott. In fact, I probably spend more time there than is actually good for me. But that's the easiest place to connect with me. I have a Facebook author page and an Instagram page, and you can contact me there. And the first 3 Light Mages reissues will be out in January and February.
All right, perfect. And I want to thank all of you and thank everyone for watching. See you next time. Bye.